Hello and welcome back. This is Professor Plyman here, and today we're going to be talking about your research essay. So, this project is titled Beneath the Surface: Culture, Identity, and the Stories We Carry. So, for this project, you are going to pick some cultural aspect and write about it. But I don't want you to just describe it. I really want you to dig deep, to analyze it, and to explain what lies beneath it. So you'll be using Born a Crime as well as scholarly research and your own observations to investigate one invisible aspect of culture and argue about how it shapes identity, beliefs, relationships, or even behavior. Now, you will be asked to use Born a Crime, but this essay is not a book report. You're just using that as an example, and I'll show you what that's going to look like when we get to the prompts in just a minute. So I do want you to remember that this is not a book report. Instead, you are going to be analyzing a cultural belief, practice, something like that. So ask questions like, why does this cultural belief exist? How does it shape people's lives? What do people misunderstand about it? Or maybe even something like, why does it matter today? So for this project, we're going to be using the culture iceberg. If you don't know what this is, I have a photo of it on the very next slide, but spend some time researching it, looking at it. There is one in eCampus. Print it out, take notes on it, think about what you see and what you notice. But one of the things the culture iceberg does is it talks about the difference between visible and invisible culture. So visible culture is going to include things like food, clothing, holidays, whereas invisible culture is going to include things like family expectations, language, religion, identity, values, humor, gender roles, communication, traditions, things like that. And this is that image of the culture iceberg that I was talking about. Pause it, spend some time looking at it, see what you notice, what stands out to you, what are some concepts that you might want to talk about. So culture is more than food, holidays, or clothing. It is shared beliefs and values, traditions, behaviors, even ways of thinking that shape how people see the world and interact with others. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out before you start writing is this idea of culture. Culture comes from a lot of different places. It's not necessarily just one thing. It can come from our family, it can come from our community, from language, from religion, from region or nationality. What part of the world are we from? It can come from our profession, right? There's a huge difference in professor culture versus, perhaps like nurse culture or doctor culture. It can come from your hobbies and interests. I had a student one time really explore D&D culture, which was fascinating, and how that shaped not only his life but the lives of others around him. Culture can come from socioeconomic background. You can be from the same country, the same race, the same religion as somebody else, but if you have a different socioeconomic background, you're going to likely have different culture. And then, of course, culture can also come from personal experiences. We read Born a Crime this semester. There was so much in it about race and religion and gender and nationality, right? And all of those things were aspects of Trevor Noah's culture. He's also a comedian, right? That's another aspect of his culture. So think about how all of these things work together to create the person that you are, and you're free to explore any element that your culture comes from. So let's talk about some essay guidelines for this project. This essay is going to be between 1,000 and 1,500 words, not counting your works cited page. In addition to Born a Crime, which is a required text and will be used throughout the essay, you are going to use 4 approved secondary scholarly sources. So use Trevor's book as an example and then support it with your own research. Now, I have 5 prompts. You can find these prompts as well as suggestions about these prompts in the assignment instructions. But I will say this, if you want to address something else that fits within the parameters of this assignment, just send me an email or stop by during office hours and we can chat about that if you have a brilliant idea that I just didn't think about. But we're going to go through the 5 prompts so that you can get an idea of what your paper might look like. So the first one is this: what do people misunderstand about your culture? Throughout Born a Crime, Trevor Noah challenges readers' assumptions about South Africa, race, language, family, and identity. Through storytelling, he reveals that culture is often far more complex than it appears. Choose one aspect of your own culture that you believe is commonly misunderstood. Develop an argument that explains that misconception, why it exists, and what people often fail to see beneath the surface. So if you picked this prompt, you might play with questions like, what assumptions do people make about your culture? Why do those assumptions exist? What experiences or examples challenge those assumptions? How does Born a Crime encourage readers to question stereotypes or assumptions? And how do your research sources deepen your understanding of this cultural issue? The second prompt is called Looking Beneath the Surface. The culture iceberg reminds us that many of the most important parts of culture are invisible. While food, clothing, and holidays are easy to observe, beliefs, values, communication styles, family expectations, and identity often lie beneath the surface. Choose one below the surface element of culture and analyze how it shapes people's lives. So you might think about questions such as, why is this cultural element often overlooked? How does it influence identity or behavior? How does Trevor Noah illustrate this idea in his book? Or how does research help explain its broader significance? The third prompt is on language, identity, and belonging. So one of Trevor Noah's greatest strengths was his ability to move between cultures through language. Throughout Born a Crime, language becomes much more than communication. It's identity, belonging, opportunity, and even survival sometimes. I would like for you to analyze how language or communication shapes identity within your own culture or community. Look at questions such as, how does language create belonging? How can language include or exclude people? What role does code switching, dialect, multilingualism, or communication style play in your culture? How does Trevor Noah experience compare to your own observations? And how do your research sources deepen your understanding of language and identity? The invisible rules of culture. Every culture has unwritten rules that shape how people think and behave. Trevor Noah constantly navigates these invisible expectations throughout Born a Crime, often discovering what happens when those rules are challenged or broken. So choose one unwritten rule that exists within your culture or community and explain how it influences people's lives. And there's a whole list of examples in the assignment instructions. The questions that I want you to think about for this topic are things like, where does this expectation come from? How does it shape people's decisions? What happens when somebody breaks this rule? And how does Trevor reveal similar cultural expectations? And lastly, what do your research sources add to your analysis? And then the last prompt is on the stories that shape us. Throughout Born a Crime, Trevor demonstrates that personal stories can reveal larger truths about culture, identity, history, and even society. Choose one aspect of your own culture and use storytelling, research, and analysis to explain how it shaped who you are or how you see the world. Your paper should move beyond simply telling your story. Instead, use your experience as a starting point for a broader analysis supported by Born a Crime and scholarly research. So questions you might think about if you pick this prompt are: what experiences best illustrate your chosen cultural topic? What does that experience reveal about your culture? How does Trevor Noah use storytelling to help readers understand larger cultural issues? And how do your research sources explain the broader significance of your experience? And why is this story important for others to understand? So, regardless of which of the 5 prompts you picked, there are some guiding questions that your essay should reveal. So the first one is, what does Born a Crime reveal about culture that people often overlook? How does your chosen cultural element shape identity, beliefs, or behavior? What do your scholarly research sources contribute to your understanding of this topic? How does your analysis connect your individual experiences to broader cultural or social issues? And why does understanding what lies beneath the surface of culture matter in today's increasingly interconnected world? So regardless of which prompt you pick, I really want you to kind of think about these as you are researching, drafting, and creating that final essay. So regardless of which topic or prompt you pick, there are some things that I'm going to be looking for in your essay. A clear, arguable thesis, the integration of your memoir and your research sources, strong paragraph development and organization, analysis. Remember, this is not just a summary of Born a Crime. This is not a book report. I'm looking for a cultural analysis. And then the last one is the connections between personal narrative and larger cultural ideas. So in your essay, I'm going to be looking at your organization and development. Specifically, how do you go from, those first drafts to the last drafts? How well is your essay organized? What's your flow like? I'm going to be looking at your MLA formatting. I'm going to be looking at your mechanics and grammar, sophistication, and then, of course, creativity. If you have questions, if you need help with this project, please reach out. I am always here to help. We also have other resources, whether that's online tutoring, online essay drop-off, or just visiting a writing tutor in the library. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.